Okay, coming up we have the debate paper, and your topic for the debate is, here's your question. So debate question: should the mass media portray more images of sexual and gender diversity to audience of all ages? So in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about what this question means, and then I'm going to go through a short search, how to do a search for sources using the Chaffey College Library, and then I'll show you a sample debate paper, so what it typically looks like. So first of all, when you construct your title page, you should have this title on your title page, so have this question. And that way, so the exact question should appear on your title page along with your name, the class, and the date. So the wording of the question is important, because if you rearrange it or if you rephrase it according to your memory, then your arguments may be reversed. So please, word for word, this is your debate question. Mass media, I have a side note here. So when we're talking about mass media, we're talking about literature, film, music, internet. So that includes sources of social media will be included under internet, etc. So those are all like magazines. Those are all examples of mass media. Mass media are forms of communication that go out to a mass audience. So, should the mass media portray more images of sexual and gender diversity to audiences of all ages? When I say sexual diversity, I am talking about sex as in male, female, as well as sexual orientation diversity, so not only heterosexual people, so people who happen to be shown, a heterosexual couple happen to be shown in a commercial. So that would be kind of what is the norm, to see heterosexuals portrayed rather in the mass media. So then when we're talking about sexual diversity, then we're talking about portraying people who are, for example, a same-sex couple, people who may be homosexual, or, someone who, and we don't really necessarily know if someone is bisexual, but we do know what images that the mass media portrays. And quite often what the mass media has done historically is to show a more traditional view, a more conservative view of people in the mass media. It's only been more recently that we see more images of ethnic minorities, for instance, and interethnic couples. You may have noticed that in commercials. We see that a lot more today. The other thing that maybe we're starting to see, but still don't see too much of, are couples that may be same-sex couples. And it doesn't mean that people are shown, showing physical affection for one another, like kissing, or, certainly not, having sex. That's not what I'm referring to, and sometimes that's kind of a miscommunication. So by sexual diversity, that just means, maybe showing, in a film, someone, maybe one of the characters has lost their partner, lost their longtime spouse, and the spouse may happen to be of the same sex. Well, that's showing sexual orientation diversity. So that's what I mean by sexual diversity. And then gender diversity means portraying males and females that don't necessarily conform to the traditional idea of what a male is supposed to be or what a female is supposed to be. And these are things that are defined, these are behaviors that are defined by our society. So when we're talking about gender, we're talking about our society and our culture stating what it means to be a male, what it means to be a female, how we should dress, how we should speak, what our hobbies should be. All of these kind of interests conform to a very, some might say, more rigid idea of what we're supposed to be based upon our sex. So based upon if we're male or we're female. So gender diversity might be showing a male who's doing, behaving in a way that is traditionally part of the female gender role, such as being a caretaker of children. Or showing a female who maybe has an occupation that is traditionally usually for a male. So, a female who's, working for like a construction company, or she's a construction worker, or doing road repair, for instance. So that's showing gender diversity. And then audiences of all ages, that part I think is fairly explanatory. So that could be in the form of children's programs, teenagers, young adults, on up, middle adulthood, programs that are targeted towards all of those groups, and older adulthood. So should we see that diversity to audiences being portrayed to audiences of all ages? Okay. And let's go right over here to the Chaffey College website. And here we have, so let's think about doing a search for potential sources. One thing that I'm clicking on library. This isn't the only way that you can do a search for these sources, but this is a good technique to use when you're looking for academic sources. So just doing like a general, like a Google search, you'll probably find a lot of sources, but they may not be academic sources. Academic sources are those that the author has to submit their article, for example, and it is peer reviewed, meaning that other experts in the field review that article, review the research, and they determine if it is acceptable within that field of expertise, if it is worthy of being published in that field of expertise. Academic sources also include many books, not all books, but many books. And you could, you can even use the textbook as one of your sources. So you should have at least 2 sources for your paper, and those sources should be academic. You don't want sources where it's just someone kind of spouting off about their opinion. I'm not really interested in opinion, and at this point, on the college level, you should be starting to learn to distinguish between quality of sources. Are sources, just someone who's, talking about what they think, but they really don't have any credentials. It's just someone's personal blog. Or is it maybe something that you found through this, through the database, through the Chaffey College databases? So if we are going to do a search for a source for this particular project, then I would start off coming here to the library and clicking on Articles and Database List. So I'm going to click on that. And the databases that I frequently use to locate sources for the field of sociology are things like Academic Search Complete, or down here we have, and some students use JSTOR, so I've heard some recommend JSTOR. And there also is SocIndex with full text. So these are, articles, books, all within, etc., all within the field of sociology. So let's click on that. And I have to type in my information here. Hopefully I remember it. Okay, so here we are with our search page. And what you will need to do with this search is to kind of go back to the topic and think about, okay, what are the main ideas that I'm searching here? So I'm searching for sources related to the mass media, but I'm also searching for sources that are talking about sexual and gender diversity. And you can include sexual orientation and gender diversity. So maybe that'll clarify it a little bit more. So let's try that. Maybe portrayals of sexual orientation diversity or gender diversity. Portrayals of sexual orientation, mass media. So, what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of putting out my feelers here and just trying to figure out what search terms that I should use, what's going to give me some good sources. And it's kind of a trial and error. And, it can, take you a few times to do that. So we have, down here, we have full text that's already checked. And for academic sources, I want scholarly peer-reviewed journals checked, because those are those sources where, in order for an author to be accepted for publication, the article is reviewed by experts in the field. So that means that they've gone through all of the steps they need to take in doing their research. And that helps us find credible information. Okay, so here, this is interesting. So I typed in sexual orientation and diversity. Yeah, portrayals of sexual orientation and mass media. So I don't even have diversity. But here I have this article that says progression on Nickelodeon, gender role stereotypes in toy commercials. So what you will need to do with the project is kind of look for sources that are related to our topic and construct the arguments. So I might, in clicking on that, I'll just click on something that, sounds interesting. And I start out by reading the abstract. And this is a study that examined 455 toy commercials, which were analyzed by the type of toy, etc. And they kind of give me just an overall kind of, in sum, what did they find in this study? What were they doing and what did they find? What were their conclusions? So the majority of girl and boy characters were featured in gender-specific toy commercials. And there were more identifiable girls than boys. Almost one half of the characters were children who predominantly played indoors in mixed-colored settings and engaged in cooperative play. Boys were more likely than girls to be shown outdoors and playing competitively. So that is not gender diversity. So this is something that is actually fairly kind of sticks to traditional gender roles. Girls maybe being shown indoors playing with, dolls, for instance, and boys who were being shown playing outdoors or being very active. So within this article, I'm thinking that if I read further, it might tell me what are, maybe some of the problems with this. So what's the big deal? And that can lead you to then constructing these arguments about why maybe gender diversity is important for one of your arguments. So for the paper, you're actually doing yes arguments and no arguments. So you don't get to choose which argument you'd like to do. So these are the instructions that I have posted on Moodle. And as we see down here, you'll have a section with your yes arguments and a section with your no arguments. So you will have to do both, and you should do both just as well as the other. So if you happen to agree maybe with the yes position, then maybe your yes argument is extensive. Then you get to the no argument, then you need to put some effort into your no argument and come up with some good arguments based upon your academic sources. Okay, I am going to pause here. I'm just about at my 15-minute limit, and I'm going to pause and come back, and if you need more information, I will talk a little bit more about the debate paper here and going through this, continuing with doing a search.